Welcome back to This Week in Film. It's the weekly podcast where we get together and talk about the movies we've seen over the past 7 days. I'm Nick Panotto, joined as always by Midwest Matt Lauer. Matt, how's it going?
It's going pretty well, Nick. How are you?
I'm doing just fine today. I just felt like saying it like that, I guess.
Well, I mean, that's how you say it when you're doing just fine.
I guess.
Yeah.
I assume you have seen some movies this week.
I saw one movie, and it was
really?
a movie that you told me I had to watch, and it's called Brigsby Bear.
All right. Yeah. I also watched Brigsby Bear.
I know you did. You better have.
I saw 2 movies this week.
Oh.
One was Brigsby Bear.
Uh-huh.
And the other is a movie you told me to watch called Get Out.
Oh, finally, I can stop recommending it. I don't even care whether you liked it or not at this point. I'm just glad I don't have to keep telling you to watch it.
I guess this is going to be a spoilery episode.
Hell yeah.
So I guess if you haven't seen Brigsby Bear or Get Out, we're gonna spoil them because we've both now seen them.
I suspect some of you have seen Get Out. I kind of suspect none of you have seen Brigsby Bear.
Everyone should watch Brigsby Bear.
Well, I'll go ahead and spoil things a little bit. I don't think everyone should watch it, but I think people who like unique and strange movies should. Yes.
And everyone should see Get Out. It was quite good.
I'll agree with that.
All right. Now from here on out, Spoiler Town.
Yeah.
Population
2 at least.
2? Yeah, 2.
The population, however many of you are listening.
It's so many.
Plus us. Oh, population Brazil.
Thank you, Brazil. Number 4.
Woo! Get that number 3 slot.
Let's start with Brigsby Bear.
Yes.
I adored this movie. I thought this was the best thing ever. I loved it so much. When it was over, I was saying to my wife, I loved that. I loved it. I loved it. And she forced me to watch it too. She was like, we're going to watch this movie because the poster for it was really bad. Uh-huh. It's like a bad 80s school photo. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I do not want to watch this movie because the description of it, if you haven't seen this movie and you would like to watch like a quirky kind of drama comedy, just turn us off now and go watch that movie because I feel like going into it completely blind is the best way to go into it.
Maybe. I don't know if you need to be in it completely blind. I don't know. Well, if you want to be completely blind, don't listen to the next line. If you want to be slightly less blind, I'll tell you one thing that I think might help. It's not going to get very dark. That's my anti-warning.
It's true. I agree.
And I guess we're moving into things here because I'm going to say, I got a vibe from this movie that was slightly similar to the movie Super and slightly similar to the movie, what was that, like Robo Boy or something like that? Turbo Boy.
Turbo Kid?
Yeah, there you go. Turbo Kid. And it was off because those movies both get very dark at points, especially Super. And I, throughout most of this movie, was waiting for that to happen. Each time something came up where I'm like, oh no, this could go really badly. This must be where the movie's going to get extremely dark. And it doesn't happen, which is, I think, good because it's actually just kind of cute. And I think I might have enjoyed it more if I kind of knew that. If I realized that, like, oh, this isn't actually about to turn into something where I see someone's head split in half laying on the ground. Because honestly, I really was waiting for that most of the time. And part of that might be the tone of those other movies. And part of it may be that you told me to watch this. And I walked in very ready to never watch anything you suggest me to watch again. Because I was expecting it to be something that you went through miserably and that you just didn't want to be the only one in Misery's town. So I was like, all right, I'll do it because I asked you to change our schedule slightly. But it ended up just being pretty innocent and lighthearted. And I guess why don't we go ahead and tell folks what it's actually about?
All right, so it is a movie from 2017. It is directed by Dave McCary, and it stars Kyle Mooney. Mark Hamill is in this movie. Greg Kinnear, a few other recognizable faces, a couple UCB people, and it's almost a Upright Citizens Brigade.
Oh, is that what Andy Samberg's from?
I don't think he's from UCB, but he's from SNL, which is where a lot of the other people in this movie are from. Like Beck Bennett is in this, and it's produced by Lonely Island, who is Andy Samberg's band / I guess production company. They make movies and stuff for Netflix. And I had no idea that this ever even existed until we came across it. And I love Lonely Island. I think they're the best. And so when I saw, when the production companies are going across the screen and then there's like the fake Sony classic pictures and it says Lonely Island, I was like, Lonely Island? Is Lonely Island involved in this? And they are. They produced it, as I just said. Anyway, so it starts out, you have no idea what time it is or what time period it is. It feels like it's 1985 and you're like, okay, so it's 1985. This older kid who looks like he's like 20, maybe 20 plus. He is a little off and his family seems a little off and he's really into this TV show called Brigsby Bear. And when I say really into it, there's nothing else in the world to this kid. And he's obsessed with it to the point where it's like hurting his quote unquote mom. and his dad is just totally into it. And his first dad, I guess we'll call him, because we said we're doing spoilers, so there you go. His first dad is Mark Hamill, and they're just talking absolute nonsense for like the first 10 minutes of this movie where my mouth was just open and I could not believe what was going on. I was like, what the hell is happening right now? I was like, I was just so confused.
Well, it's pretty clear. I mean, it is nonsense and you don't know what the context of it all is, but it is pretty clear while they're talking jargon that it has to do with the fantasy world in this show that the kid's obsessed with.
Yeah. Well, then they start talking about math problems and stuff too. Like, I guess he's really good at math. And then they show them at dinner and they do like a weird prayer and handshake. And I was like, what is going on? And then the turn happens when Mark Hamill comes in to tell the son, hey, why don't you come upstairs to the dock or the deck with me and we'll have a little chat. And you're like, okay. And we go upstairs, not out to a lake, but to like an overhead glass dome.
Yeah, it's almost like a greenhouse of sorts.
Yeah.
Like it's not all about plants, but it's got that whole this whole thing is made of glass.
Like a biodome kind of thing. I guess the idea is supposed to be that they're in a hermetically sealed bunker like 10 Cloverfield Lane a little bit, where something terrible has happened to the world and these people live underground like in the Fallout video games. And you're like, oh, this is like a post-apocalyptic movie. Now, again, remember, I didn't know anything about this going into it, so right. I am just as cold. I'm just trying to build this world as the movie's showing it to me. And then Mark Hamill starts talking about the Rocco bugs or something like that. And it cuts to these like light bulbs on sticks that are like going back and forth. Like animatronics in a shitty like Disney World.
Yeah, exactly. Like a Disney World ride or something. There's like a fox that's just kind of got one movement it's making.
It like moves its mouth and its leg. And I was like, oh, it's some sort of scam that these guys are running. And then the next morning, Mark Hamill leaves to go to work, but before he leaves, he puts on like a gas mask and then gets into his car and drives away. And you're like, and then 5 minutes later, it's nighttime of the next night or something, and the police show up and rescue him.
Hang on, because I'm going to interrupt. If you're going to go through the plot beat by beat, I'm going to interrupt here and there to just kind of throw in some of the things I noticed and wondered about. And right there, I think it's relevant that the kid is outside, the quote-unquote kid. At this point, he's like gone outside of this dome and he has to wear a gas mask because he's expecting the air to be poisoned.
Right, yeah, he expects the air to be toxic, yeah.
Kind of raised some questions for me because it seemed a bit like he's sneaking out, but it seems a bit like it's something he's done before too.
Yeah, you could tell he's done it plenty of times.
Yeah, and in retrospect, I found myself wondering, was there any clue at all, or do they explain at any point how the police figured out where he is?
There is like a dropped line where someone says they saw him that day when the dad goes out.
Yeah.
The dad's going out to make the show, and someone sees him go into a warehouse. And one thing leads to another, and that's how they followed him back to his house, and then they found him there.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's how I figured it out, is how like the whole thing fell apart, is someone just saw him out. And I guess they were looking for them.
Okay. Okay.
But so the police barge in, a whole like SWAT team come in, and Kyle Mooney, who plays, what's his character's name? James?
I don't know any of the characters' names.
Yeah, his name is James. And Mark Hamill and his wife are telling him how much they love him and just remember what we told you, blah, blah, blah. We love you, we love you. And the police are like, get down on the ground. And then someone puts a blanket around Kyle Mooney and they take him outside and they put him in a police car. And he's so confused. He's so out of this world confused. And so are you as a viewer. And you're like, what is going on?
See,
and then he says...
I didn't feel at that point like it was confusing anymore. Like I felt like, and maybe this is just because my mind made a connection there between this and like Kimmy Schmidt, the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, where for listeners, like it's a girl who's been trapped in a bunker with a couple other girls by this like cult leader dude. And I kind of got the same thing right there where I was like, oh, okay, so he's been kidnapped. And he thinks it's the world's poisonous, and clearly it's not. Like it's been a lie, or like Cloverfield, where it's like, of course, at Cloverfield, in the end, the twist is that it wasn't a lie, but like it kind of seemed that way to me right there. And throughout the movie, and I guess this is one of my knocks on the movie, but none of the knocks really matter too much because it's got this sort of fantastical feel, kind of like a movie like Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, where it's like, okay, normal rules of the world and normal social stuff don't really apply, because I kind of felt like there are moments in the movie where I expect him to be more confused, and this was sort of one of them where he expects the air to be poisonous, but he doesn't freak out quite as much as I would expect someone to. Like the cops are like, no, the air's fine. Here, I'm going to put the window down. And he's like, ah!
Yeah.
But then he kind of chills out. And I'm like, I think I would be kicking and punching things and be like, what are you doing? And he sort of does. And I'm not knocking the acting or anything. It's definitely one thing that throughout the movie, I'm like, I expected that to be a bit more frightening for the guy. Like he tends throughout the movie to accept things more quickly and more easily than I anticipate. But then again, I was expecting someone's head to get blown off or something. So who knows?
Yeah. So basically we find out that when Kyle Mooney or James was an infant, Mark Hamill's wife kidnapped him. And he's been with Mark Hamill and his wife living in this underground bunker, basically hiding from the world for the last 20 years. And then the movie kind of goes from there, where like the kid gets introduced to his real family. And it's from this point where I was like, I just kept expecting, and this is why the movie I felt like was surprising to me, or why I think I really liked it, is that at no point during this movie does anyone betray him. The cool dude that he becomes friends with, and the kid, he starts telling him, he's like, oh man, yeah, Brigsby Bear is so cool, like where he's like into it. I just kept expecting there to be cliche after cliche where we would find out that the friend didn't really like Brigsby Bear. He thought it was terrible and he was just screwing around with him. Or,
like it's just a mean-spirited sort of hoax.
And
or like once they start making a show that like he's just going to rip him off and like be like, all right, I'm going to make a bunch of money off of this idea.
Yeah, you just keep expecting that to happen, and it never does. And it was just so refreshing where I was like, oh, okay, these people are people. And even the sequence when they're filming that explosive, when that bomb goes off and they're like driving away and the bomb explodes, and then he gets out of the car and he's like, we were driving around with a bomb all day. And he's just so mad at his friend, but then like he gets over it. But even when the police show up and he just puts his hands up because he's it's like a joke because he's black, and he's just like, oh, the cops are here, I'm gonna do whatever he says. And then Kyle Mooney, who's white and doesn't know anything, just walks towards the cops wearing
his bear suit,
yelling everything's fine, while this bomb literally went off behind them, and he gets tackled by the police, and you're just like, oh, okay.
And that's a moment where I was like, oh, this is where someone's head gets shot off.
Yeah.
Nope.
The only character that I didn't really care for was Claire Danes, who was the therapist or the social worker. And she was the one who seemed the most impatient of anyone. And I found that kind of obnoxious, where I was like, the movie doesn't really explain to you how much time has passed since he gets rescued and when the end of the movie happens. Like I feel like I
kind of got the impression of a couple weeks.
Yeah, I get that too, but I also think it could be like a year. Like a year has gone by.
There's a moment where, and this is later on in the movie, where he gets hospitalized.
Yeah.
And it's not exactly a montage, but there are a couple like kind of quick cuts. And in that, like, where all of a sudden he and Andy Samberg are kind of friends. And I got the impression there that, like, oh, maybe a bigger chunk of time has passed here. It could have been a few months or something, because he's sort of not quite at home there, but it seems implied that he's been there a while.
Yeah. And also, if it's only been a couple of weeks or even just a couple of months, the fact that everyone gets fed up with him so quickly is unreasonable, where the guy's got no social norms whatsoever. And the therapist is the one who's saying, you need to get over this bullshit. And he's like, I just want to watch Brigsby Bear.
Yeah, there's a lot with her where I'm like, I guess this is just, okay, so as someone in the mental health field, I gotta say, like, there are very few representations of psychologists and therapists and social workers that are accurate, at least to any good clinician. And this is one of those moments where I think this movie does a pretty good job of, not with the therapist, but with people around him, kind of illustrating, like, taking the audience into his perspective a bit. Yeah. And then as people respond to him, it's like, man, come on, people, you are really not, you're expecting him to do things on your terms, and he's been brainwashed for 25 years. So to that degree, I'm like, wow, this movie does a pretty good job of putting us in our shoes, where we can see that the parents, the actual biological parents, care about him, but they're walking into the situation with their 20 some years of effort,
trauma.
And they're like, hey man, we've been caring about you this whole time. And I'm like, yeah, but none of that. He hasn't been there for any of that, you idiots.
Yeah, he doesn't know who you are.
And instead of the therapist translating any of that, which, by the way, that whole thing never becomes the sort of conflict it should. Like, none of the conflicts, I can appreciate that it's refreshing that they're not cliche, but they also just never get to where they would in the real world. So, like, the parents and he never really get into a super fight, other than just being like, yeah, we're going to put him in the hospital. And that is just sort of glossed over, and it's a short part of the movie anyway. But instead of having a therapist who's like, okay, well, I get this a little bit better than the parents, she's even worse. Like,
yeah, she's
just
like,
the
most impatient.
Yeah, she definitely is like, hey, look, dude, here's reality, and I'm going to treat you as though you should be able to understand that and process it. And there's just at no point in this movie does anyone go, hey, let's come up with a plan for transitioning this guy. It's just like, hey, this is how the world is out here. Welcome to it. And it's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's on purpose, but it's strange. And Claire Danes, as much as I kind of had a crush on her in like high school years and stuff, and I enjoy looking at her. I don't think I care much for her acting. I haven't seen her in a ton of stuff, but when I have, I've been like, I'm not sure. Maybe it has something to do with the roles she's in, but I'm like, I'm not sure, or just with me, but I'm like, I'm not sure I enjoy her performances. And here I'm like, I don't know if this is how she's portraying this character, or if it's just as it's written in the script. You know what I mean? I don't know if you have the same experience or not.
I didn't care for her in this movie. I don't think it's her fault.
Okay.
I think she did okay. I also have not seen very much Claire Danes, other than watching My So-Called Life in high school and then a couple movies here and there. But apparently she's supposed to be very good on that Homeland show, but I have not seen 1 second of that show. But I guess she's supposed to be pretty good.
Yeah, maybe I've just kind of seen her in odd roles, and maybe it is just the way this was written.
When she first shows up, it's kind of like a behind the head, kind of 3/4 shot of her, and my wife and I both thought it was Gwyneth Paltrow, and we're like, "Wow!"
For a moment, I thought it was Scarlett Johansson.
Movie? Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, I could see either one of those. Like, the movie's got some pretty big-ish stars. Like, I could see them showing up as like a favor to Andy Samberg or something. Mm-hmm. I really liked Greg Kinnear in this movie.
Oh yeah, me too.
I like him from almost the beginning, when he's in the police station after he gets rescued and he thinks he's under arrest or he's in prison. Or
just to be clear, when the kid gets rescued and Greg Kinnear's a police officer.
Before they introduce him to his family, he says, "You've been missing for 20 years. Those aren't your parents." But Greg Kinnear's the guy who has to like break the world for him, where he's like, those weren't your parents, they stole you, and you're going to meet your new parents. But before we get there, did you get molested? And the guy's like, nah, this isn't about that.
He's like, yeah, they touched me. They would like shake my hands and stuff.
And Greg Kinnear's like, okay, well, here's a Coke. Brought to you by Coca-Cola.
No
this
kidding.
Movie was.
Taste this magical elixir.
You want to taste something delicious? How about a refreshing Coca-Cola? And, I was like, that's pretty funny as far as product placement goes. And also, when you're trying to like win a kid over, a sugary treat usually works. And I guess, like, again, he's like 20 years old, but he kind of has the mentality of like a 12-year-old. Like, he's perpetually 12 because of the way Mark Hamill and his wife brought him up. And the other thing that I liked about this movie is that I don't hate Mark Hamill, and I'm conflicted about that because they were never cruel to him other than stealing him from his family and raising him in a bunker. You could tell that Mark Hamill and his wife, I should learn his wife's name if I'm going to keep saying that. Jane Addams plays April Mitchum.
She played Mel on a couple episodes or seasons of Frasier. Someone that David Hyde Pierce's character Niles is in a relationship with. She's good at being kind of a demanding weirdo in that show.
She's got like a Shelley Duvall kind of feel to her. So what we find out from Mark Hamill later in the movie is that basically Jane Addams just came home with Kyle Mooney one day when he was a baby, and Mark Hamill's like, I didn't really know what to do, so I didn't do anything. And 20 years went by, and you're like, okay, that's cruel and terrible, but they never abused him or mistreated him other than, again, stealing him from his family and raising him underground in a bunker, convincing him that air was poisoned so that no one would ever find him. Mm-hmm. Like aside from all the obvious psychological damage, they were nice to him. They loved him, and he loved them back. And for that, like, I can't hate Mark Hamill. Like, I was like, I'm kind of torn on him. And then, like, how he keeps referring to him as his dad, because of course he would. It's been his dad for 20 years. Like, if I came up to you and said, hey, your dad's not really your dad. This guy's your dad. Now you're going to live with him. And you'd be like, I'm not going to do that at all.
Well, yeah, and when it comes to the parents, the one thing I didn't really kind of confused me a bit was the mom's response. So in terms of this whole, like, Mark Hamill as the dad, what turns out to be going on is that he basically leaves, I don't know, quote unquote, for work, but he's the one creating this show, Brigsby Bear, to give the main character, James, I guess, some entertainment and also, like, educational stuff. It's like he tries to teach him some things through Brigsby Bear, which as the movie unfolds, you kind of find out, like, some of them are like age appropriate, where it starts talking to him about masturbation and stuff. But
the show grows up as he grows up.
But what kind of confused me there is, like, the mom seemed to have some sort of issue with him being so into Brigsby Bear, and I'm like, what is she wanting? Like, is she actually trying to groom him to go out into the outside world more? Because it certainly doesn't seem that way. But so I don't know exactly what she's wanting for him.
My opinion on that is she is sick to death of Brigsby Bear. She doesn't want to hear about it. She has to be his friends on the internet and talk about it on his, like, Commodore 64 computer that he has, and it's like her and Mark Hamill who are the internet to him, and he talks to them on the message boards, and he finds out later that everyone on the message boards who what were their screen names? Brigsby Fan 1, Brigsby Fan 2.
Yeah.
Every one of his friends on the internet was just Mark Hamill and his wife, and I think her whole world revolves around this stupid bear. And the show, like Matt was saying, it's like educational. So it's like Teddy Ruxpin meets Barney meets Sesame Street.
I guess. Yeah.
I guess. We're like, Brigsby Bear is like this bear who travels the galaxy solving problems, and his nemesis is this
angry son. It's like the Teletubbies son gone evil.
Yeah, that's great. That's perfect. And, like, that's basically the plot of the show. But apparently it gets very complicated because it's like in its 20th year, and the lore and whatnot goes so deep, and it's just ridiculous. And it's the only show that this kid has ever watched.
And he gets a new episode every week, and it's all on VHS tape because I guess they can't update technology at all in the bunker. You can't be like, hey, here's a DVD player.
Yeah. So that, I guess that's basically the plot of the movie. And then he decides that he wants to make new episodes of Brigsby Bear. He wants to find out what happens to Brigsby Bear in like the final episode, basically. So he decides that he's going to make a movie. And Greg Kinnear has access to the evidence against the parents.
Yeah, so like props from the show.
Right. Included in that is all the props. And so one day Greg Kinnear comes by the house and he feels bad for the kid. And he like brings him all these props and he says, you know, here's this stuff, kind of keep it on the down low because this is evidence, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, have fun with it. And I hope it puts a smile on your face. And then the dad, the real dad, comes out, and that's Matt Walsh, who's a UCB guy. And he comes out and says, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I just brought this stuff for him from the Brigsby Bear set. You know, I hope it like brightens his day up or gives him something to look forward to. And the dad makes like this amazing point where he's like, he says, these were tools used to keep my son chained and taken from us for 20 years. Having this in my house is torture for me. Why are you doing this to us?
And Greg Kinnear's kind of like, oh, yeah, I really hadn't thought about it that way. Sorry, man.
Yeah. Greg Kinnear just has that look on his face of, right.
Oh,
the
yeah.
Kidnapping.
I screwed up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Going back a minute, though, because we ended up going into the Brigsby Bear thing, talking about Mark Hamill and the mom. So you were saying what your take on the mom was something else. And I get what you're saying. Like, she's annoyed. She's tired of the Brigsby Bear thing. And fair enough. You know, even if you shot yourself in the foot here by kidnapping this kid, like, what's your sense of what she wants, though? Like, just to, like, she doesn't know? She just knows she doesn't want Brigsby Bear anymore? Or, like...
I think she just wants him to stop talking about Brigsby Bear.
Okay.
It's, my wife and I talked after this movie was over, and we're joking about, like, our kids. And when your kid's obsessed with something, it's literally all they will talk about, and it gets obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
For a while with my son, it was Minecraft, where, like, I like Minecraft. I think it's a neat game. I'm not good at it, but I enjoy watching people who are good at it play it, and my son likes to play it. But for about 4 months, it was the only thing he would talk about. Like, you would bring something up and he would go, oh yeah, that reminds me of about in Minecraft where this goes. And you're just like, okay, please stop talking about Minecraft. And even right now, he's really into that Earth Defense Force game.
Yeah.
So he's talking about that a lot. And you're just kind of like, okay, please stop talking about the video game that you're really into, and you really get it, and you play along, like you're polite about it, and you're not like mean to them or anything about it, but at the same time you're like, please stop talking about this same thing we've been talking about for 3 weeks. And the mom has the look on her face where because usually what happens is they get obsessed with something for a few weeks and then something else comes along and then they get obsessed with that. Nothing else has ever come along for the main character in this movie, so it's only been Brigsby Bear, always been Brigsby Bear, and always will be Brigsby Bear. And what doesn't help is that Mark Hamill is really into it. Because he's making Mark Hamill's making the show, and he takes the ideas from Kyle Mooney and turns them into the show. And like, that's basically the story of the show, is he just turns this kid's questions into the TV show so that Mark Hamill doesn't have to actually answer them for him. It's very confusing, but
no, and I get the annoyance. I guess there just may not be an answer because even the character may not be thinking about, like, sometimes I'll ask people like, okay, you know what you don't want, what do you want? And they'll be like, oh, I don't actually know. I mean, I have that moments like that myself where I'm like, oh, I'm trying to change this or that. And then go like, okay, because I know I don't want this, you know, thing A, what is thing B? And it's like, oh, I don't even know. Right. And with the mom, it seems like maybe from both our angles, it's pretty clear she doesn't want more Brigsby Bear, but maybe she's not actually after something. I think when I was watching the movie, I was more in the mindset of like, she's trying to do something, like make him grow up into something else, maybe for some reason, like so he can operate in some sort of, maybe the outside world, should they ever decide they want him to like live more of a life, or like into some sort of career, you know, like, hey, you know what? You're trapped down here, but how about becoming a computer engineer or a physicist or something?
Yeah.
But maybe she doesn't.
They're really into
in
math.
particular.
Like they're really into math.
Yeah.
Like he's got math homework to do every night, and
Yeah.
and it's like complicated math. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's like I guess I was kind of with that in mind, kind of like, does she want him to stop being about Brigsby Bear so he can become a mathematician? You know, like I know a lot of parents with like kids who are really into video games in their teen years. It's like, hey, you know, we want you to put that down more so you can move on to other things. And I'm just like, what is she wanting him to move on to? and if they weren't going to let him out at all, like, it doesn't even really matter that much. You just, instead of getting a kid that could grow up, you got yourself a prisoner, and now you're bored because he's a prisoner.
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit of what you said and a little bit of what I said, where she doesn't want to do this anymore, but she can't stop. Like, you can't get out of it.
He'd be like, oh, hey, you know what? Good news. The apocalypse is over. The air's clean again. Get out of here.
See you later.
Go do more stuff. Another thing is, like, throughout this movie, if you do, like, you got to not take it apart too much because there's stuff that doesn't really work. Like, he has all this Brigsby Bear stuff in his room. And it's like, unless Mark Hamill has access to various factories, where is he getting, like, a Brigsby Bear bed set and a Brigsby Bear like posters and hats?
Exactly, yeah.
But again, it's kind of like Steve Suzu, where you're like, okay, so sharks look like computer animated cartoons, and things in this world just, they don't follow all the rules.
Yeah. I mean, like a lot of those props that the dad makes for the show, like the one prop, which is just a stick with a rope on it. Like, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But he's got like this one plastic rock that lights up. Like, how do you even make that by yourself? I also like that he's got on the Brigsby Bear show, there are these two girls that are like twin sisters.
Yeah.
And he's in love with one of them. And when he gets out, he goes and finds the actress from the show. And she's like just some lady who works in a diner now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he like wants to know about her and all this stuff. And she's never mean to him, and she understands, like, she's very understanding, and she's sorry that she did it. But when she's making the show, he told her that it was for some Canadian public access show, right? That no one ever saw. Yeah.
Again, it's like real innocent.
Yeah.
Like, she didn't go into anything going like, oh, we're going to play a trick on somebody. She's like, oh, I just thought I had a gig as a, very unfamous actress. And
even when he shows up, she knows who he is and what role she played into it. And now that he's there, she's like, oh, you're that guy. Why don't we talk? And they sit down and they have like a nice conversation, and he's weird, but she's very kind.
Yeah, she's real patient.
Way more patient than Claire Danes. And when it's over, he's like, I love you.
He's like, oh, yeah, by the way, I'm in love with you. Bye.
And she's like, and then the cops show up, and he goes, yeah, I'm an outlaw since the day I got out. Like, he gets arrested like every day. And he like walks out, and he's like, I'll see you later. And he like walks out with his hands up, and he's like, please don't tackle me. But like, again, like, the movie doesn't go down that dark cliched road where we don't have the scene where he's like asking her to be in the movie. And and we have the sequence where she goes, oh, I don't know if I can do that again. I just don't think I can put myself through that. We just go to the final cut of the movie, and she's just in it. And
this movie wraps up like, hey, by the way, everyone, everything works out perfectly. It's very like, we know what we're doing here. It's just going to be, here's a giant cupcake at the end. Even Andy Samberg's like, you have no idea what he's dealing with in terms of mental health. He's out. He's not in the hospital anymore. He's in the movie.
He got a day off to go be in the movie.
The parents are like, hey, while you were in the hospital, and for some reason we didn't bother to call and tell you that we're processing things and understand you, we went ahead and like built a set in our garage, and we're going to finish the show.
I did not have a problem with it. I was like, this is terrible, but the movie's got to end. Well, so
it would be terrible if the movie hadn't established very clearly throughout the process that, like, again, it's not working with all the rules.
Yeah, it's fantastical.
Yeah, like, and the guy he picks up on things. He doesn't understand some things, but he picks up on things enough to not be creepy, like to not be insistent with the actor who played the twins, enough that like at the very beginning of the movie, this girl gives him a hand job. And he's like, thanks, I like that a lot. And some of the lines there are very funny.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of like little throwaway lines here and there that's where a lot of the humor really is. Like those are the parts that actually made me laugh out loud. And his delivery is really good. But like going back to the rules thing, he talks to this girl later and he's like, hey, I'm glad we don't need to get married or anything. But by the way, if you want to ever do that again, she's like, no, not going to happen. And instead of like being confused or frustrated or anything that might be pretty normal given the context of his life and everything, he's like, oh, okay, I understand.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he
like,
wouldn't understand, but the fact that he does, the fact that he's picking things up works better, and he and his sister, even though they don't get each other at first, can start to get along a lot quicker than it would happen in real life. Even at the party, he goes to a party early in the movie and he doesn't know what's going on, but unrealistically, he's able to pick up on stuff well enough to still become friends with this guy that in real life they wouldn't become friends. To pick up on slang that honestly would confuse him a lot more. But it's sort of established like, okay, he's screwed up, but he can adapt in a pretty unrealistic way. And that's going to make this movie kind of have this easier going tone. And so at the end, when everything wraps up, it's like, it's practically a joke that like, hey, we're wrapping up like an 80s sitcom here. Everybody's learned their lesson. And it's fine. Well, it's fun.
Like they even have the sequence where he looks at the stage and Brigsby Bear's there nodding yes at him.
Right.
And he like teleports away.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man. So, I mean, it's not a perfect movie. It's not the best thing ever, but I really enjoyed the hell out of it. I was so surprised, one, going into it, because like I said, I had nothing going into it and left. I felt as good leaving that movie as I did leaving The Joker, because it's not only a well acted movie and funny and endearing, but it's also very well shot. Like it's pretty gorgeous to look at, especially for a comedy. Like there's some interesting cinematography in there, and it's just well done. Like it's well made and it's not cliched. It's heartwarming without being saccharine, I think is a phrase. And it's endearing without making you roll your eyes. Like you're just kind of like, this was nice.
Yeah, it's pretty like quaint and charming. And there are a couple of moments that are like sort of touching. Like there's a moment early on when he is talking with the guy that they unrealistically, become friends with, where he just says like, you're my friend. And it's nice. Like in that moment, I'm like, oh, he found a friend. And then I was like, oh, it's going to be sad when this guy tells him he can't stand him anymore. But
right.
that never happened.
That's what I kept waiting for the whole time, was that scene where the friend is just like, dude, you are a joke. No one likes any of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And then we'd have like the scene where he's like, oh, and then he leaves all sad. And then the friend feels bad. And then the friend gets everyone together to rebuild the show. And then they surprise him with it. Kind of like what actually happens in the movie. But the friend never betrays him like that. And you just keep waiting for moments like that. And it never happens. And it's just so, I think I just liked it because it didn't do what I kept expecting it to do, which would be predictable.
Yeah, I'm gonna read a few of my notes that I just wrote as I went through and in order. I'm gonna skip a few. So, very first note, like 2 seconds into this movie, again, I was expecting Nick was setting me up to watch something miserable. So I'm watching the first few seconds of Brigsby Bear, the show, and WTF is this shit? Next note, there's a good chance I'll never watch anything Nick suggests again. Next, kidnapped? Next, yup. Something about Kimmy Schmidt. And then, when is this movie going to break my heart? Question mark. And then, I'm fearing the conflict. And it just never happens. So, yeah. And how unrealistic is this friendship? But, when it comes to the good stuff, I was like, these lines, where he's like, I'm not a real bear, don't worry. And I don't even know who said this now, but they were like, try to focus on your tragic past. I think he's trying to like give someone notes on acting in the show. Mm-hmm. Somewhere in there's a line. He's like, only touch your penis twice a day.
Yeah. Even if you want to do it more, only do it twice a day.
Oh, yeah. And one of my other favorite parts of this was the Google searches. When he's doing internet searches, like what he's typing in for the searches really do fit for how someone who doesn't know technology and has been out of touch with things would approach trying to get questions answered on the internet. They're really fun.
Yeah. They're very like literal questions. What's funny is that while he's typing it out, the autocomplete pops up and like some of the stuff he asked is already there.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny. The one last thing I wanted to mention, because I thought it was good, is at the end, they're done making the movie and he goes to see Mark Hamill in prison, and they sit down and they're talking to each other, and the Kyle Mooney guy says, well, I just really have one question for you. And Mark Hamill goes, okay. And then he tells like the origin story of how like they stole him and all that stuff. And then Kyle Mooney just goes, I don't care about that at all. And then he pulls out like a big stack of papers and drops it in front of him. And I thought that it was like legal stuff. Sign away the rights to all this stuff to me so that I can make this movie. And it turns out that it's just the script for the movie. And they need Mark Hamill to do the voice of Brigsby Bear because they've got everything except the voices. And so he pulls out a tape recorder and Mark Hamill goes, oh, okay. And then they just record it. And then like the final scene comes up. And I was just like, this is nice. Like you keep like even with the scene where he's like, when Mark Hamill starts telling him the story, I was like, he doesn't care about this. He's here for something else.
Right.
And then
like,
even though I expected it, it delivered it well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I kind of saw it coming, but it didn't make it any less enjoyable.
Check out Brigsby Bear. It's quite fine.
Well, and I think that says something, too, though, that at the end, like, not really expecting a conflict is like, that's how long it took me in this movie to get to the point where I'm like, oh, nothing very intense is going to happen. Nobody's going to be mean. And so I'm like, oh, no. He probably just wants him to do something for the movie or like answer him some questions. So like, okay, so where did the sun god come from?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, like, right. I like the other thing where the Mark Hamill's talking to the kid and he goes, I talked to your mom via letter. And he's like, well, I mean, April, like we write each other letters. And you know what? She solved that math problem we've been worried about for 10 years. And he's like, what? He's like, yeah, turns out the answer is 6. Or something like that. And it's like such a stupid thing where you're like, what? And then they're like, oh, because that's something that was important to them.
Right.
Before life interceded and pulled them apart. And I this movie really did it for me. It was good. I was cracking up. I liked it a lot. Do you have anything else for Brigsby Bear?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So the second movie that I saw this week is a little film entitled Get Out. From 2017, written and directed by Jordan Peele. It stars Daniel Kaluuya. Is that how you say his name? Allison Williams, Bradley Whitford, and what's the mom? Kathleen Keener is the mom. And Stephen Root shows up in this movie, which I didn't expect to see. And I think you've mentioned this movie once or twice that it's something that I needed to see. And
maybe twice.
And this movie was pretty good. I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. It made you really uncomfortable the whole time. And I don't really quite know how to take that. Like, I feel like this is it's an African-American production for African-American people to be like, hey, like white people have Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street movies.
And like 98% of the movies.
Yeah, like all the movies. But but they're white people problems in there. And then sometimes they address black people problems, but from a white perspective.
Very much.
Where this movie goes from the black perspective, I'm assuming, I do not know what that is because I don't have it, but I'm assuming it's a look at the world from a black person's eyes at the white world. And it's a horror movie, so it's like it gets crazy. And like the whole time you're like watching this movie, you're like, he's got like this one friend who works at the TSA, and he's just like, do not go to that white people's houses. Get out of that house. And I'm like, I agree. Do not go in there. You're like, nothing good can come of this. Like the minute, oh gosh, I don't even know where to begin with this. It's just so interesting, and you just feel so uncomfortable until the horror stuff starts to happen.
Well, here, I'll give you the little quick version of the plot.
Please. So
there's a young African-American guy who's dating a white woman who is played by the 20-teens version of Amanda Peet. There's something about the two of them that they look very similar.
Yeah, I said she looks like Lake Bell, who's an actress that I like. She's like a comedic actress.
Okay. No offense to this actress. I just don't know her name. I think she is a good actress. So
I believe it's Allison Williams played Rose.
Okay. And so where we pick up into the movie is they've never been to meet her parents yet. And so he's like, okay, we're going away for a whole weekend to meet these people I've never met before. And she's like, hey, just warning you, they're a little very white.
They're very white, very corny, but they're nice.
And they're not prejudiced, but they're definitely not, quote unquote, woke either. They're going to be, my dad's going to tell you about how he wishes he could vote for Barack Obama a third time. And I think it does a good job of setting things up for an audience that might cross a pretty big spectrum of awareness, where it's like, hey, white people, when you think you're being not racist, you're still being racist.
Yeah.
And so she's sort of preparing him in sort of a gentle way for that. Turns out it's all a hoax anyway, but they, and then they go there and he starts picking up on not just that these people are not as woke as they think they are, but stuff here is nefarious. And then eventually he discovers that this whole thing is a setup for white people who have this very condescending admiration, if you will, for black people and then steal them. And basically implant their consciousnesses into the black people's bodies.
They buy them in an auction.
Yes, that's true. But I mean, like, in terms of what they're doing for themselves as an individual is to take the African American person's body and just be like, that's my body now. I'm going to be in you.
The white people have like a brain transplant kind of thing with the black person's body. Like an old white person gets put into a young black person's body.
Yeah. It's like it's just using you as like a skin suit.
Yeah. So that's the big twist of the movie. And somehow it's been 3 years since this movie came out and it did not get spoiled for me.
Really?
I had no idea what this movie was about. I knew like there was a lot of race stuff in it and it was like twisted and uncomfortable, but I did not know the twist. So, hey, thanks, world. Yeah. Now that I have spoiled it for you, the next people to come along, but I told you it was going to happen, them. So you were warned. Going back to the beginning of the movie, what I like about this story is that there's a lot of movies that you could take a cast and literally pull characters out of the hat or actors out of a hat and say, all right, you're going to play this guy, you're going to play this girl, you're going to play this guy, even if it was written for a man or for a woman, and you could adjust the script based on who you have cast in the movie. For instance, like almost any, let's just go with a horror movie because that's what this is. Almost any horror movie, the cast you could just throw up in the air, and however it comes down, that can just be how you have your cast. Like your main character could end up being this guy instead of that girl, or your main character could be Asian or black instead of white. But what doesn't really matter in those movies is who is actually playing these parts, except to the producers who are trying to maximize revenue for a movie. Yeah,
they're just like, who's going to sell the best?
Right. And for the most part, I guess that means it's a white person because it's more white people star in horror movies than black people.
Well, more white people are known because more of them are cast in the leading roles in movies.
It's true. And so what this movie establishes is that your main actor has to be a black guy. And the antagonist of the movie has to be not black. Like they could be Asian, and they do have some Asian people in it, and they're also racist. They're just as, I don't want to say hateful, but because it doesn't seem like they're like racist in a hateful way, but they definitely don't see them as equals.
No, they're kind of objectified and idolized in a way that's like dehumanizing. It's a little bit like in It Follows, the way that the quote unquote best friend idolizes his love interest. It's like everything he thinks or feels or thinks he feels towards her is quote unquote positive, but none of it treats her like her own autonomous like human being. And here it's like, yeah, man, black people are great because look at what they can do with sports, and it's very functionalized. Like, I like this thing about them. No, they're not people. They are the things that they do that entertain me.
Right, exactly. Like the one guy who's like, it's very fashionable to be black now, and it's like, Jesus. And there are plenty of people who believe that. And they believe that thinking that makes them not racist. Mm-hmm. You know, like, just because you don't hate someone doesn't mean you're not being racist. Right. And so I think that's what this movie does really well, is that Stephen Root ends up being the guy who buys the main character, Chris, played by Daniel Kaluuya, who is British, I believe. Let me make sure I get this right after last week's fiasco with Jurassic Park, because he's from London.
Really?
Yeah, because he's in like the most boring episode of Black Mirror.
I don't think I've seen the one that he's in yet.
That's the one with they have to exercise to earn credits in order to not watch commercials.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that one yet.
It's boring.
I do like the episodes I've seen of Black Mirror.
Some of them are great and other ones are not so great. Anyway, he does a great job as far as acting in this movie. He's spectacular. And so Stephen Root buys him, and they have like this exchange where he goes, "But why are you capturing black people?" And Stephen Root's is blind, apparently. He's a blind art dealer, which is interesting because they have an exchange earlier in the movie where he meets him and he goes, "I hear you have a very good eye." And he describes the way he shoots because Chris Washington is a photographer. Mm-hmm. And that's why Stephen Root wants him, is because he wants that artistic eye that he has, which I feel like plays into his brain. like it's not just his eye. Like, you have to use his brain, his skills and his way of seeing the world. But now you're getting too deep with the movie. So that's why he buys him, and he says, "I don't care about your skin color. It doesn't mean anything to me. I just want your artistic eye." And in that moment, Stephen Root is the least racist person in this universe, where he's like, "It doesn't matter to me that you're black. To those other people, it matters because they think they're buying a fancy car or whatever. But to me, I just want your eye. You could have been anybody to me." And I thought that was interesting. I forgot what my point was to go to that. I also don't know if you're still connected to the phone.
I'm here.
Okay.
I don't know what to, I'm kind of thinking about it, because it's sort of like at the words level, it's kind of half a step away from saying I'm colorblind, I don't see color, which is a bullshit sort of other kind of systemic racist sort of process. But I think in this sense, well, I guess what's implied there is he's not concerned about the guy's color, but he's also not, or his race, but he's also not recognizing that oh yeah, I wouldn't be able to steal your eyes if it weren't for the fact that you are African American. But I also get what you're saying there, where it's he's not, he's not I want to steal your eyes because you're a black person. He's just going, I just want your eyes. So yeah. I'm just kind of thinking about those things at the same time. That's why I'm quiet. I'm thinking.
Well, I think if the store he was going to sold white people that were also photographers, yeah, he would have bought whoever the best photographer was.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. But I think you're right. I think that's true. I don't think he wants his eyes because of his race. But there's a certain thing kind of implied there too, that yeah, to you it doesn't matter, but he wouldn't be in this position if he were any other race. Right. Or particularly if he were white.
Because the only thing that they're selling is black people.
Right.
So the Stephen Root guy is at the mercy of the shopkeeper, for lack of a better word, because the market has determined that we're only selling black people because that's what most people want, which is I thought it was fascinating, where you're oh, there's a whole black market, no pun intended, to this whole situation, where I'm sure there are people out there who would want to purchase, I want to spend the next 40 years as an Asian person to see what that's like. But they have that silent auction where they sell off the main character, and he just basically holds up fingers, and I'm assuming that he's holding up fingers for millions of dollars, $1 million or $2 million, and one person goes for $10 million. And if the next person they brought in would only go for $1 million because only this one person wants to be Asian, they're not going to bring him in because there's no money in it for Bradley Whitford's family. It's like an economics lesson almost. And I love that. I think that that's terrific. It just adds this level of of world building to the environment that I really was able to grab onto, where like the joke of the movie is that it's, oh, we got all these crazy white people, get out of those crazy white people's house. And then it just turns into, it doesn't matter that you're black other than the fact that people want you to be black. It doesn't matter to us. We don't, it's like racist without being, like I said before, racist without hateful, but I don't know.
Well, I think that one of the points you're making is a point that the movie is trying to illustrate to people that you're right, that it's like, this doesn't have to be, racism doesn't have to be a thing that feels like hatred to you. There is this sort of systemic racism that's objectifying and dehumanizing without feeling hateful. So I imagine there are a lot of people that went to this movie, a lot of white people that went to this movie, kind of like you said, like kind of proud of themselves for being so woke because they're not hateful, who the movie was maybe trying to illustrate something to in a way that's like, hey, by the way, all that stuff that you do when you're like really proud of yourself for like not being so racist, a lot of that also has its own racism to it, its own way of objectifying and dehumanizing to it. And I think that's actually a really cool thing that this movie does, where it's like, yeah, this isn't a hatred motivated thing that's still very painful and hurtful. And I really like a lot of how the movie does it. One issue I do have with this movie, and I don't really know what to make of it, and I wish I could, maybe there are some interviews with Jordan Peele where he talks a little bit about this character, but like Chris's friend, who is warning him like, dude, there's something about this doesn't seem right. I don't know if you should be going there. There are aspects of that character that seem to me a bit like caricature-ish. And he was my least favorite character in the movie. I had off and on moments with him because there were certain jokes and stuff that he made where I'm like, okay, that's a pretty good point.
Until he went to the police department, and
then it becomes just a joke.
Yeah, he just becomes a joke, and I was like, oh, this is making a wrong turn here. I don't care for this.
Well, and then he kind of comes and rescues the day, saves the day at the end, at least just in terms of like picking up his friend. And I kind of wanted the movie just to end where it did, where he's like, okay, I'm escaping. You know, like I got away from everybody. I'm going to get out of here. And I'm like, and maybe some of it is just I didn't want the movie to end on a joke, because he's like, I am TS motherfucking A, and I'm like,
right, which is not a good joke.
No,
it's not.
So
it's not very good, and they keep playing it up the whole time. Where
and that I was like, for some reason that some of it maybe I'm not quite sure how to put my finger on. I'm like, this doesn't feel like it fits for me, and maybe it's because so much of the movie is getting outside of stereotypical stuff, and the character seems like a caricature, and maybe some of it's just that it's humor in a movie that is largely more, you know, it's got humor with the other characters in moments, but like largely it's a very grounded movie, and that sort of took out some of the groundedness and the reality feel of it to me. Yeah,
what you just said exactly. It takes away the weight of the movie a little bit.
Yeah,
because they go back to him and we're like, oh, we're on our little TSA adventure now. Oh, we're going to make fun of this guy or laugh at him or not laugh at him because he's not very funny.
But I don't know. I feel like Jordan Peele's he seems like a very deliberate director that I'm like, I don't know. Maybe there's something this character is supposed to be doing that I don't understand. Or maybe I just want it to be. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't care for him. I feel like he's in the movie so much because he saves the day at the end, where if that wasn't how the movie ended, we wouldn't have that whole sequence with him with the police detectives and stuff. And I don't know what to make of that scene. Like, he's going in to file a missing persons report.
Yeah.
And they laugh him out.
Yeah, like they start pulling in other people to like hear his story just to laugh at how goofy it sounds.
And what I was expecting that whole time was for him to get killed, because they're in on it. Like, I expected them to be in on it, and at the end they're just like, you're crazy, white people, ha ha ha, get out. And then he's like, oh, I guess I gotta solve this crime on my own. And you're just like, okay. But like when he goes to file the missing persons report, I feel like what they should do is take it seriously, but what are they gonna do? They don't know where he is. They don't know who these people are, but they don't do anything about it. It's just such a waste of a scene. Like,
Maybe
I feel like it was just added to pad the runtime or just to make the people watching it. Like you said, like, who is this movie for? Like, who's the targeted audience for this movie? Is it predominantly for African American people, or is it for white people to see how the world is for African American people? Because when he goes to the police station, the lady working the case that he is, she is also African American. So when she starts laughing at him, I was like, oh, she's in on it. She must be a white person underneath. But no, she's just a jerk.
I want to say that if I had to pick one, and I don't think it is just one, but if I had to pick an audience and go, here's who I think it's primarily for, I honestly think it is more for an African American audience, that where the movie's going like, here's this stuff that we know happens and that we understand, and that if a white audience is there, they might get these things from. You know, like it's but I don't think it's for, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't feel like it's for a white audience. I don't think it's just to be a teaching tool, but it addresses things that people who experience them on a daily basis can go, finally, a fucking movie is saying what we experience. And I do kind of wonder, now that we've been talking about the police stuff, I wonder if that's a bit of an analogy or a hint to like towards, since it is police, like interactions with police, and kind of going like, hey, you know what? There are some pretty legit complaints and they're not taken seriously. You know, like people are getting disregarded and hurt by police all the time. And there may be protesters and people complaining about it, but honestly, it's not getting treated very seriously. But I feel like that would be better done with a character who's not being hilarious at the time, or trying to, or whatever, you know, like if it weren't humorous, if he were to go in and be like, hey, look, here I am, a reasonable human being explaining what's going on in a way that's not over the top and caricaturish, and I'm not carrying a dog under my arm or whatever was going on. Yeah.
I feel like that character, they told him he was, hey, you're the comic relief of the movie. Even though nothing you say is funny, you're going to be funny. Like, just the way you are will make you funny.
And I generally hate the comic relief in most movies. So, yeah. I don't know. I think I could have done without him. I'm definitely a bit confused by him. And if that stuff with the police is meant to be something, it is supposed to be saying something, especially if it's supposed to be saying what I was talking about, then I would have liked it to be a bit more grounded too. It's the humor that's intentional humor is definitely the ding on this movie for me.
Yeah. The scene at the very end when the police car shows up, and as the police car is rolling up, he's strangling the main character, or the girl.
Yeah.
And what you think right away is, oh shit, they're going to shoot him.
Right.
Like he's going to die here. And, you know, like we know he's in the right, but it's a white girl getting choked by a black guy in the middle of the night by a policeman. So the implication there is, oh, shit's going downhill for this guy real fast, because she even like reaches to the police car and is like saying, help,
right,
help. And he looks at the police car and he's like, oh, Christ. And then it turns out to be the friend who figured out where he lived because he's in the TSA. Doesn't make any sense, but movie's got to end. And so then you have like this moment of relief where you're like, oh, good. It's not a real cop. What happens after this? Like what's the cleanup to this situation? And that's not clear. And like the movie's got to end. And I feel like the end of the movie is where it gets real. It really falls apart, especially when he makes his escape from the chair, the hypno chair. How's he able to get those cotton balls in his ear?
I don't know.
He can't reach his ear. If he could reach his hand with his mouth, he could undo those straps. So I got a real big problem with that. That didn't make any sense to me. But again, movie's got a movie.
But you did bring back up that police thing, and that was an effective moment where the police car is coming up. So maybe that's why he's there. But could I rewrite the script a little bit? I'd be like, okay, it turns out to be his friend. He gets in the car and they look at each other and go, man, let's get you out of here. You know, like just not a joke. Just don't put a joke in there. Yeah. Not needed.
Well, I mean, it's also a callback to the earlier scene, like after they hit the deer.
Yeah.
And the policeman asks the main character for his ID and she goes off on the cop. Like, you don't need to see his ID. He didn't do anything. He wasn't even driving. And the cop's like, I can ask for his ID. And the main character's like, here's my ID. It's here. And because he doesn't want to get into it and he doesn't want to be her soapbox. There's another movie. I can't remember what movie it is, but it has something to do with race. And someone uses the phrase racial tourism or something like that, something along those lines, where she's, for a long time, I thought the movie was going to be she's dating this guy just to spite her parents, where she's not really into him, but...
Right, he's a prop for her rebellion.
Right. She's like, now I'm dating a black guy. Look how intriguing I am. And she refuses to... He's like, have you told your parents? He's like, because even if they're fine with it, I think me rolling up out of nowhere might throw him off a little bit. And she's like, nope, I'm not telling him. And from his point of view, he's like, well, that's weird, but okay. And then there's a lot of interesting race stuff in it. But the other problem that I have with it is, why is the grandmother their servant? Like, the grandma and the grandpa,
why is that their role? Why would they make them housekeepers?
Yeah, like, I don't know. Hey, grandma, you've got a nice young body again. Clean our house.
Oh,
serve
man.
us
but
iced tea.
Woman, I know this isn't the point you're making right now, but that woman's so good.
Oh, like, yeah, she's amazing.
The smiling and crying and awkwardness is just, man, such an impressive performance moment. Yeah, that actually throughout this movie, a lot of the sort of side characters have some really interesting, and once you understand what's going on, you realize how well crafted it is. The other guy too, who gets flashed with the light and starts acting kind of skittish. Just great jobs there.
Yeah, really good movie. Very interesting, very thought-provoking. And there's a reason why I didn't watch this for so long. And it's because I didn't want to have to think about a movie this much. Well, that's why I watched Boyka, because I don't have to think about that. Although I spent so much time thinking about Boyka.
One other issue I took with this movie, and I feel pretty strongly about this, is that I want to know what the hell was going on with the skeleton deer that were in the preview. Like, where is that? This isn't in the movie. In the preview, go back, go online or something, check out the preview for Get Out, and you'll see this like scene with all these, like, I think there are a bunch of skeletal deer like running across the road or turning towards the camera or something, and it's just not in the movie. And I'm like, what's that? I want to see it. I mean, it might not be relevant to anything, so it might be a good idea to have cut it out. But I know that was some interesting imagery in the preview, and I was like, I want to see that imagery more. I want to see these skeletal deer.
Oh, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah.
I also didn't care for the brother, not because he's like immediately a dick, but he's just obnoxious. I just didn't care for that character at all. Like, the first thing he says is, he's like, he gets drunk and then he's like, you're a black guy, so with your physical gifts, you could be a really good MMA fighter. And he's like, okay, I don't want to do that.
You know what?
It's just like, oh, this is weird.
I didn't like that character the first time through. I mean, you don't like the character. He's not a good guy. But there wasn't anything about it that I was taking away that enhanced the movie the first time through. But I saw it again later, and like, once I understood, what was going on in the movie, I was like, oh, his behaviors are actually, they make more sense and are a lot more ominous the second time through, because you can basically see that what he's really doing there is sizing the guy up, kind of like looking at him like a steak, basically, and going like, what am I going to do with you? Like, if right. I can get into this election or this auction, and I can get you, let me figure out what I can do with your body. Here, let's wrestle. And it kind of adds a little bit. It's still a pretty disgusting character, but like, it has a little bit more like, oh, this is here for good reason.
I really liked Kathleen Keener, the mom. She's excellent in this. She's so...
Is it
Catherine Keener, yeah. She's so menacing, and she seems like, I mean, because she has the power of hypnotism.
Yeah.
She's the most powerful person in this movie, but she's terrifying. And like that scene later where he gets free and she's just kind of hanging out in a study or whatever, and they both run for that cup because that's how she can control him, is with the spoon sounds or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that's his trigger or whatever. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, that's cool stuff. I like
did
her a lot. There was a while back in like kind of a weird time in terms of like age and stuff, but like I think I was maybe the end of high school, early undergrad that I really got into Catherine Keener and like looked up movies just that had her in them.
I don't think I was even aware of her until 40-Year-Old Virgin.
She's in like Being John Malkovich. I'm thinking of some like independent movies from back in the day. You're right. She was in 40-Year-Old Virgin. I forgot about that. But she's a really good actress. Or female actor.
She's excellent in this movie. The girlfriend I thought was kind of weak, although I did like the twist at the end where he's like, get the goddamn car keys. And she's like, she pulls them out of her purse and she's like, I can't give you these keys, right? Like, yeah. Like, because the whole time I kept going back and forth. I'm like, she's in on it. Oh, she's not in on it. Oh, she's in on it. She's not in on it. And then my wife brought up a good point is at the end when he finds all the pictures of her other black boyfriends in the closet that's open for no reason. And they're all inside that box. After he gets tied up and put in the chair, she's already working on her next victim. Yeah. And there's like this cool shot of her sitting on the bed, eating cereal and out of a bowl, but drinking milk out of a glass. Definitely a psychopath. But although while she was doing that, I was like, I wonder what that's like. I'd like to have some Fruit Loops and a glass of milk. I bet that's pretty good. But she's like plotting her next victim. But behind her are all those photos that the boyfriend found of her other boyfriends on the wall in frames. And my wife and I were talking like, what kind of a maniac puts pictures in frames only to take them out like 2 months later? Like putting pictures in frames that's like time consuming. That's like your whole afternoon right there. And she's like put them all back up. I would have appreciated it more if inside that red box were framed photos of her other boyfriends, because then it doesn't imply that she took the time to frame them all to put them on the wall. It really took me out of it. And then for some reason she has a gun, and that was the opposite of Chekhov's gun, I think, because I don't feel like you see that gun in the house anywhere before she just has it for some reason.
Yeah, maybe.
Definitely a cool movie. I liked it a lot. You have anything else for Get Out, Matt?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, now's the exciting time on our show where we get to our movie rankings list. So, Matt, where are you going to put Brigsby Bear?
I am putting Brigsby Bear between The Witch and Happy Death Day to You.
Oh, into your number 22 slot.
Yeah, and just to point this out, Brigsby Bear is going 2 slots above Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Which you liked.
Which I did. Yeah, I'm not trying to rag on it. I'm just saying it surprised me.
How many stars would you give Brigsby Bear?
3.5, I think.
Oh, Brigsby Bear autocorrects to Bring Him Here.
Or that.
I'm sorry. How many stars did you say?
I'm between 3.5 and 4. I think, I'll just go with 3.5.
3.5. Okay. And I'm guessing it is a recommend?
Yeah.
Okay. That's all you saw this week.
Correct.
Is Get Out on your list here?
I think I reviewed it before that, so I don't think it is.
Well, I'd say let's put it on there, but that violates the rules, which will be changing
eventually
next week.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've decided what it will be.
Oh, okay.
But before we get there, I am going to put, starting from the top, I'm going to put Get Out in between Joker and Frozen into my new number 19 spot. I'm going to give it 4 stars and a total recommend. I kind of want to put it higher, but I did like Joker more, and I don't know if I like it more than Predator. I don't know. We'll see. This feels like a movie that I'm going to watch a bunch of times now that I've seen it. Mm-hmm. Finally. And then in the number 22 spot, between John Wick 3 and the Velocipaster, just above the Velocipaster, I'm going to put Brigsby Bear. And I'm going to give this movie 4 stars. I loved it. I was kind of torn on whether or not to give it 4 or 4.5, but after we talked about it, I was like, 4 stars seems good.
Yeah.
And that brings me to our new rule for the list. So we're on week 151 of the list, Matt.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Isn't it?
Any movie that is on the list for 52 weeks is now eligible to be rewatched and re-ranked.
I'm not going to rewatch anything.
Okay. But if you do...
There are some that I would like to re-rank, but I'm not going to watch it just to do that. I'm sure I'll get around to Jaws the next 52 weeks from now, and I'll put it back at number 1.
Is Jaws not at number 1 for you anymore?
I'll say I'll put it back at number 1. Right where it is.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so for me, like, I could move Mrs. Claus around. Or Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Yeah, that's the only problem, is that the bad movies you have to watch again. But if it's a good movie, maybe you put it higher. But I'll start a new column here in my spreadsheet to keep track of its original ranking. So anything that gets moved will have an asterisk.
I just listened to a review of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves from I Hate It, But I Love It a couple of days ago.
Oh, yeah?
Good stuff. Good stuff.
All right, Matt, anything for Midwest Matt recommends?
Yeah, actually, Scott had told me about a game on the Oculus. It's called Creed, like a Rocky Creed, Apollo Creed's son? What's
Adonis Creed is the son.
Adonis Creed, yeah. So there are a couple different boxing games on there, and Scott had said that he liked Creed, and I had a different one that felt kind of janky. Like, I enjoyed it, but it didn't feel quite as good as a lot of the games on there do. Creed's really good, so if you have an Oculus, it's probably the best boxing game so far.
I didn't know that there was a Rocky game for the Oculus, let alone a Creed game.
Yeah, I don't know that there's any other Rocky. I don't think there's any other Rocky game. The library for games on the Oculus isn't huge, at least not yet. It's growing, but there are a few different boxing games, and this one, some of the games have a really, really tight feel to them. Like it really feels like the motion is going along with what you're doing. It's pretty impressive.
For those who don't know, the Oculus is like a virtual reality game system.
Yeah, and I have the Quest, which is the wireless version, and so like the real nice thing about it is most of the movement in most of the games feels pretty accurate, but when it comes to some of the boxing games, I'd say the Creed one, movement can get a little funky when you're trying to move yourself around, like as far as like walking around, but I'm starting to get the hang of that. But the punching and stuff about it is what you would want from this kind of thing, which I think for a lot of people is probably the selling point of this kind of thing, is where you can get some exercise. But if you like, for instance, you, Nick, have young kids and you're thinking about getting one, don't get it for the sake of your kids, because I think your kids have to be a certain age for it to really work well and for it to be a good idea. Mm-hmm. So anyway, but if you have one, Creed.
Oh, well, you talked me out of it. I was going to get one, but now I won't.
Well, get it for you, because
have you
Vader Immortal at the very beginning, when you look up, you're in like a spaceship, and you look up through the ceiling and you see a bigger spaceship. It's like a I don't know, destroyer or whatever, and that's the very first thing I played on it, and I was like, wow, oh, cool.
Have you punched the wall yet?
No, it's really good at what when you put it on to play a game, you can always reset this too, but you can see the room you're in like a black and white sort of, kind of like with an Xbox One or Xbox Kinect, but you draw a line on the floor to let it know where is the safe. You kind of outline safe space for you to be in, and it's good at letting you know when you're getting near the edge, so you don't like knock over your TV or hurt yourself.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
I didn't know they did that.
Yeah. Oh, thank God. If it didn't, I would have destroyed myself and my television.
When you play the boxing game, are you fighting Scott, or is it just against the computer?
You can play against people. I haven't done it yet. He and I played some sort of sports game though, and it was like tennis or something. We played against each other, and considering he's in Germany too, it worked really well. We did a zombie game like last Friday, and we were co-op shooting zombies in a horde. So I think with Creed you can box against other people too, but I've only played it on my own so far.
Okay. That sounds cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
All right. If you would like to get in touch with the show and tell us what you saw in film this week, send us an email at thisweekinfilmpodcast@gmail.com, or contact us on the social like our good friend Ivan did on Instagram. Ivan does things _, all one word. He sent us a message saying, "Hey guys, As always, loved the show and thought he'd send us a message, and says he wanted to send us a message about the movies he's watched. And we were talking about the Taylor Swift documentary recently, and I'm paraphrasing him a little bit. And he says, I've been super consumed with documentaries recently, and he wants to recommend a documentary called Roof Culture Asia. He says it's about a group of parkour guys traveling Asia and touring, and it says tuning, but I'm assuming it means touring, and jumping on roofs. And then he adds, it's crazy.
Yeah, that sounds...
Then he says another documentary film called Film Worker, which is something that I just saw recently. I didn't see the movie, but I saw that it exists, called Film Worker, which is about a guy named Leo Vitale who gave up his acting career to work with Stanley Kubrick. He says it's a great look into filmmaking and the people behind the scenes, and also about the decisions Leo made that would lead him to a life behind the scenes working with Stanley Kubrick. And then also, one last thing he says that he watched is because of the filmmaker movie, he watched the movie Lolita that Kubrick directed from '62, not the remake with Jeremy Irons. I haven't seen either of them. I just know that Jeremy Irons is on the cover of the remake. And he says the movie was very controversial at the time, I think because of the child sex. But again, I don't really know what it's about. And he says to check it out. Oh, and he has another message. Last one. Ivan watched a lot of movies this recently, and he recommends a Korean movie called I Saw the Devil, which was also recommended to me by a friend recently, which is supposed to be awesome.
I just realized just now, I also watched Parasite, but I'll review that next week. I better put that in my notes.
Well, thanks for the message, Ivan, and reminding Matt that he watched the movie voted Best Picture this year.
Yeah.
And then he quotes you about judge movies, not people. LOL. He likes the quote.
Nice.
So if you want to tell us what you watched, send us a message, and we'll read it on air. And it'll remind Matt of things that he's seen this week in film. Anything else for this week, Matt?
No.
Okay. Do you want a general impression of Parasite in 10 words or less?
You know what? And this mostly to you. If you can watch it before next week, definitely do, because I think it'd be a good conversation.
Okay. I'll do my best to do that.
It's worth watching. I'll say that much.
We'll put that on the poster. Parasite.
It's a movie.
Worth watching.
You can see it.
If that is the end of the reel, we'll see you next week in film.
And like our good friend Ivan says, judge movies, not people.
I'm trying to think of a joke to make about race relations, but
nope,
I'm coming up.
Don't do it.
But I'm so edgy. All right, I got nothing.
Good. Bye.
Bye.